So welcome back in continuation with the third method, that is expenditure method of measuring national income. We're going to talk about what are the steps that are involved. So I've already we finished with a brief introduction, so you can see for yourself. We can hurriedly go through this. So while you're going through this, let me just tell you that in expenditure method we measure the expenditures incurred on the final products produced by production units located within the economic or domestic territory during a given year. This is why this method is also called final expenditure method. This method is the other side of the coin of the value added method. Now, what was in the value added method? It approached estimation of national income from the sales side. Now, while expenditure method approaches from the purchases side. So, final goods are those goods and services which are acquired for consumption and investment. So, final expenditures are expenditures on goods and services for consumption and investment. So, these are the steps as you see. Now what do they do? Let's take the first one, private final consumption expenditure. So what is that? PFC, this is the sum of final consumption expenditure by households and private non-profit institutions serving households. Second is like GFC, that is government final consumption expenditure. This equals the imputed value of services produced and provided by the general government free to the people. Third is gross domestic capital formation. This equals the expenditure incurred on acquiring goods for investment by production units located within the domestic territory. There are three components as we just discussed: purchased and own account produced durable goods, net addition to stocks of raw materials, semi-finished goods and finished goods. The first component is called gross domestic fixed capital formation and the second component is called net change in stocks or change in stocks. And then we have what is known as net exports. So that's a foreign sector, foreign trade sector. So net exports equals exports less imports. Exports are included because it's an expenditure on domestic product. Though it is by the non-residents, it's a final expenditure. Import is an expenditure on domestic products of foreign countries. Imports are deducted because a portion each of private final consumption expenditure, government final consumption expenditure and gross domestic capital formation consists of expenditure on imports. Since it's not possible to identify expenditures on import values while estimating private final consumption expenditure, government final consumption expenditure and gross domestic capital formation individually, a single estimate of imports by the country as a whole is deducted from exports because it is an expenditure on domestic products of foreign countries. So this neutralizes import element in all the three, that is private final consumption expenditure, government final consumption expenditure and gross domestic capital formation. And to this, if we take, so once we add up all these, what we get is known as, the aggregate is gross domestic product at market price, GDP MP. And to arrive at, so now we have to estimate now the domestic income. So that is, we must deduct from gross, we must deduct depreciation to come at NDP, and FC, for FC from market price we must deduct what is known as net indirect taxes, that is indirect tax minus subsidies. So you can see that for yourself. So when you deduct from GDP MP consumption of fixed capital and net indirect tax, so what we get is net domestic product at factor cost. And finally, the final step, to the domestic income, if we add net factor income from abroad, that is factor income from abroad and difference between factor income from abroad and factor income to abroad, that is net factor income from abroad, is added to NDPFC, and what we get is net national product at factor cost. The other name for it is national income. So that finishes our steps for measuring national income by expenditure method. So even in this, there are certain precautions that we will discuss, and the numericals are based on this particular formulae as we put them into formulae and do it. So if you have understood, or if you have your books ready, or if you've seen that, if you go through this mind maps, like, you can make it on your own, and which will help you to learn the formulae, and of all the three, that is, first the formula of expenditure method, then income method, and the other one, the value added method. Then you're able to do any numerical based on these. And after I finish the precautions, we will do one from each, just the basic for you to understand. But it does need a little more of practice.